Do you remember the satisfying click wheel spin of the iPod Classic? That little white brick promised 1,000 songs in your pocket and changed how we discovered music. I miss those times. My first one was an iPod Mini. Then later, I ended up getting an iPod Touch and spent hours blasting David Guetta, Missy Elliott, Black Eyed Peas, Pitbull, that whole late 2000s club vibe. Now we're in the streaming era, but I'm sure I'm not the only one who misses when times were simpler with an iPod. And sadly, in 2022, the iPod was officially discontinued. In this video, we will revisit how it went from groundbreaking gadget to a canceled product, why Apple let it go, and why some fans aren't ready to move on yet. Apple wasn't happy with the MP3 players of the late 90s. They were either bulky or flimsy and had clunky interfaces. Steve Jobs pushed his engineers to build something even better. In less than a year, the team led by Tony Fadell created the first iPod, released in October 2001. This is what we now call the iPod Classic. Jobs bragged that its 5GB hard drive could hold 1,000 songs in your pocket. Since then, Apple has released quite the lineup after the Classic. The iPod Mini in 2004, the iPod Nano with a thin design and 6 colors, the tiny iPod Shuffle, and the iPod Touch, which had the iPhone's multi-touch screen. And they sold a ton, around 450 million iPods around the world. If you were like me, each new model looked cooler than the last and you wanted them all. The iPod wasn't just hardware, it was an ecosystem. iTunes let people buy, manage, and carry digital music legitimately. The iconic white earbuds and the dancing silhouette ads became pop culture symbols. By the mid-2000s, the iPod was so successful, it actually kept Apple alive while it prepared for its next act, the iPhone. But as much as we loved those early versions, things started to change. The iPhone came along in 2007 and suddenly your phone could do everything the iPod could. By 2010, iPhones were outselling iPods. Tony Fadell later said Apple knew phones would cannibalize their music players, so they leaned into it. On top of that, services like Apple Music now offer over 90 million songs and endless playlists, so you don't need to necessarily store local files. Music syncs across your iPhone, iPad, Apple Watch, and HomePod, so a separate player feels kinda redundant. Apple also stopped putting much energy into the iPod after the early 2010s. The last iPod Touch from 2019 ran the same chip as the iPhone 7, signaling the end was near. Greg Yosiwak, Apple's marketing chief, said music is still core to Apple and that the spirit of iPod lives on in their devices. They're pushing lossless and spatial audio on Apple Music, basically telling us the iPod soul is now in your iPhone and iPad. On May 10th, 2022, Apple finally said, that's it, we're discontinuing the iPod. The last iPod Touch stuck around only until stock ran out. Apple thanked the iPod for redefining how people discover and enjoy music and said its experience now lives across their whole product line. Exactly what we've been talking about. The iPod name lasted for more than 2 decades, which is a long run for any gadget. The original iPod team definitely deserves their flowers for blending hardware innovation like tiny hard drives, long battery life with software and content delivery. Features we take for granted on our phones today, like portable music, podcasts, audiobooks, all started there. Now, let's get into the juicy part. When Apple announced the end of the iPod, comment sections and forums filled with nostalgia and debate. Lots of people say they still use their iPods to focus on music without notifications. Smartphones are distraction machines, but an iPod lets you get lost in an album. Fans also like that listening on an iPod doesn't drain their phone's battery. Others said they prefer to own and store their music because streaming never quite plays what they want, no matter how good the algorithms claim to be. Having your library offline is great for commutes, travel, family parties, or spotty internet. One thing everyone gushes about is that old school click wheel and those white earbuds. It was all so simple. A lot of folks still tinker with their old iPods. They swap out the hard drive for a modern flash card or pop in a bigger battery just for the fun of keeping it alive. When Apple broke the news, some fans rushed to buy the last iPod Touch units, either to stash away as a keepsake or to have as a spare. There's actually a running debate about whether sealed iPods will become valuable collectibles or if they'll just end up as inexpensive nostalgia pieces. And then there's legacy talk. Some people feel like pulling the plug on the iPod is almost like erasing part of Steve Jobs' legacy, because that little device did help save Apple back in the day. Others shrug and say Apple had to move on because the iPhone carries the torch now, and that you can't just keep making something for old time's sake. Personally, if Apple dropped a new iPod tomorrow, I'd probably buy one. There's something satisfying about owning your music. Some older songs have even had their lyrics quietly edited on streaming platforms. So if you have the original file or CD, you get the raw and unedited version, always. As we look back at the iPod's journey, it's clear it was more than just a music player. It was a cultural touchstone. It ushered in legal digital music, rescued Apple from the brink, and set the stage for the iPhone. Its design and simplicity created memories that still resonate today. The click wheel's tactile satisfaction, those white earbuds dangling like a badge, and the thrill of carrying an entire library in your pocket. Apple's decision to retire the iPod is both bittersweet and inevitable. The world has moved on to streaming, smartphones, and smart speakers, and the iPod's job is largely done. Yet, its spirit lives on in the devices we use every day and in the way we listen to and share music. Fans continue to show their love through restoration projects, modifications, and personal collections, keeping its legacy alive. So to clearly answer the question of this video, why exactly did Apple cancel the iPod? It simply became outdated. But to the iPod though, thank you for the soundtrack of our youth, for introducing us to countless songs, and for changing how we experience music. Though you're no longer on Apple's shelves, you'll always be remembered and missed. I'm curious, would you grab a new iPod if Apple brought it back? Don't forget to show the video some love if you've made it this far, and subscribe to my channel if you think I should make more tech story videos like this one. All right, bye.